Listen well, because this story happened at a time when pride wore golden robes and wandered the earth looking for victims. The palace stood tall like a man boasting about his own strength. Inside, candles burned so bright they cast shadows that seemed alive. At a feast that night, the billionaire lifted his golden cup and laughed so loudly that even the walls listened. His friends sat around him, drinking wine that cost more than a village's yearly harvest. He looked at them with eyes full of contempt and made a vow that would curse his own life. He said, "Love is a fool's game. A poor woman is worth nothing, less than nothing. She is a tool to use and discard." His friends cheered. Then he placed a bet. He said he would marry the poorest village girl he could find, keep her for exactly 1 year, then abandon her untouched by any real emotion. Not a single tear would he shed. Not a single genuine word would he speak. The woman would mean absolutely nothing to him. His friends thought it was brilliant. They laughed until wine came out of their noses. But in that moment, the spirits that lived in the old places began to listen. The bet was made. The curse had begun. Far from the palace, beyond the noise and the gold and the lies, there lived a girl by the river. Her name was Zainab, and she was poor in a way that makes people either beautiful or broken. She had chosen beautiful. Every morning, she woke before the sun touched the water. She would fill her containers and walk to the market, selling water to families who needed it. Her hands were rough, her clothes were patched, but her smile was real. It never cost anything. An old woman lived near her hut, someone the village called the keeper. One evening, as Zainab brought her water, the keeper grabbed her wrist gently but with purpose. She looked into her eyes and whispered, "Child, your fate is walking toward you wearing poisoned gifts." It moves with the confidence of a man who has never been taught to fear. Zainab asked what she meant. The keeper would not say more. She only held Zainab's hand and pressed it to her own heart. "When it comes," she said, "remember this feeling. It is stronger than pride. It is stronger than gold. Do not let them break it." 3 days later, palace guards arrived at the village on horseback. Everyone scattered like birds. They were searching for someone. They were searching for her. They did not ask. They did not court. They simply arrived with horses and commands. And Zainab was taken. The journey to the palace happened in silence. She sat in a carriage that smelled like leather and power, and she watched the world change through the window. Trees became buildings. Fields became walls. The river faded behind her like a memory she was trying to hold on to. When she arrived, the marriage ceremony was already planned. It happened so fast that it felt like a dream, the kind where you cannot speak or move, only watch. She wore a dress that did not belong to her. The billionaire, whose name was Hassan, stood beside her with a smile that looked like a mask carved from stone. When he whispered, "I do," something in his voice sounded like mockery. The crowd laughed during the vows. She did not cry. That night, in the vast bedroom that would become her prison, Hassan looked at her with eyes completely empty of warmth. He said quietly, "You are only here for 1 year. After that, you will disappear." She understood then that she was a game, but she did not break. The palace was a place of smiles that cut like knives. Every servant watched her the way wolves watch a wounded animal. On her first morning, they hid her food so she would go hungry. On her second day, they tore her dress and blamed her for clumsiness. On her third day, a noble woman named Layla, who had wanted Hassan for herself, poured ash into her water. Zainab drank it anyway, without complaint, without anger. The servants were confused by her silence. Cruelty usually made people cry or shout. When people screamed, you knew your power worked. But this girl simply cleaned up and continued. Her quiet strength made them angry in a way they could not explain. One night, someone put poison in her food. Everyone waited to see what would happen. She ate it calmly, and by morning, she should have been dead. But she woke up perfectly fine. Her body glowed with a health that seemed impossible. The servants whispered that the river had protected her. Hassan overheard them and felt something stir inside his chest, something that looked like fear. That was when he first wondered if this girl was more than he had bargained for. An old man came to the palace one night. No one knew how he entered or who led him through the gates. He simply appeared in Zainab's chamber like he had always been there, waiting. His eyes were older than time. He sat beside her and spoke in a voice that sounded like water moving over ancient stones. He told her that the river she came from was not ordinary. It had spirits, old ones, protective ones, that had guarded her family for generations. He said, "What was made with cruelty will demand payment. Love born of deceit cannot stand without a price." He pressed something into her hand, a small clay bead from the river. "When the time comes," he said, "this will call them." Then he left as mysteriously as he had arrived. Hassan had been listening outside the door. He heard every word. And for the first time, doubt cracked through certainty like lightning through dark sky. He stood there for a long time, his hand on the wall, wondering what he had actually done. The bet suddenly did not feel like a victory anymore. It felt like he had walked into a trap, and only now was the door beginning to close. In the weeks that followed, Hassan found himself watching her. He told himself it was because she was interesting. She would sit on the balcony at sunset and look toward the distance, toward the river he knew she missed. She never complained, never demanded, never begged. When servants were cruel, she responded with kindness that seemed to confuse them even more. One day, a young servant boy broke a valuable vase. The punishment would have been severe, but Zainab stepped forward and said the vase was already broken before he touched it. She had broken herself. She took the beating that was meant for him. Hassan watched from across the courtyard. Something shifted inside him when he saw her strength. That night, at a dinner with important men, someone mocked his wife for her simple background. Without thinking, Hassan's voice cut through the room like a blade. He said, "The poorest person in this room has more wealth than any of you will ever understand." Everyone went silent. He had defended her, and he could not take it back. Later, alone, Hassan realized with horror that he was beginning to feel something dangerous. He was beginning to care. Layla noticed immediately. The noble woman had sharp eyes that saw everything, especially the cracks forming in Hassan's certainty. She watched how he looked at Zainab. She saw how his anger at others' cruelty toward her was becoming real, not performed. Layla had wanted Hassan for years, had dreamed of wearing his wealth like armor. Now she watched as a village girl was stealing him piece by piece. That was when Layla made her vow. She swore that she would expose this girl for what she truly was, a nobody, a deceiver, someone unworthy of Hassan's name. She began asking questions of the servants, of the guards, of anyone who had been with Hassan the night before the marriage. Slowly, piece by piece, Layla discovered the truth. The bet, the mockery, the plan to destroy a girl who had done nothing wrong. And Layla realized something that made her smile. This information was far more valuable than Hassan's love. If she revealed it at the right moment, in the right way, she could destroy them both. She could watch his empire crumble and his pride shatter. She could have her revenge. Hassan fell ill one night. His fever was so high that servants whispered he was dying. Doctors came but could not help. The illness seemed to be something that medicine could not touch, something spiritual, something punishing. He lay in his bed, burning from inside, calling out for water in his delirium. Everyone stayed away except Zainab. Night after night, she sat beside him. She cooled his forehead with cloth soaked in river water that somehow remained impossibly cold. She spoke to him softly, not words of anger, but of encouragement. She bathed his hands. She did not sleep. On the seventh night, when the fever was at its worst, Hassan opened his eyes and saw her. Really saw her. He whispered, "Why do you care? I am cruel to you." She said nothing. She simply held his hand. And Hassan felt something inside him break, open like an egg. Guilt flooded through him like the river itself. He wanted to tell her everything. The bet, the mockery, the deliberate humiliation. His mouth opened. The confession was right there, ready to spill out. But then he closed it. He still did not know if she was real or if she was a dream. He still did not know if love could survive the truth. When Hassan recovered, the palace celebrated. But the celebration that was truly grand happened at the Festival of Masks, a yearly ceremony where everyone wore false faces and danced in the streets. Hassan took Zainab, expecting her to be overwhelmed by the chaos and noise. Instead, she moved through it with grace. But at the center of the festival, there was an ancient ritual called the Test of Purity. A woman would be placed in the center of the square, and the crowd would throw stones wrapped in cloth, not to hurt her, but to test her heart. If she was pure, the stones would not touch her. If she was impure, she would be struck. Everyone knew it was theater, a way to humiliate women and call it tradition. They brought Zainab forward. The crowd was silent. They wanted to see if this village girl would break. The first cloth-wrapped stone flew toward her. She did not move. It curved around her like it had been pushed by invisible hands. Another stone, then another. The crowd gasped. Dozens of stones flew, and not a single one touched her. The crowd erupted. Zainab had passed. She had proven herself pure in a way that seemed impossible. Hassan realized then that she was not just a village girl. She was something else entirely. That night, alone in his chamber, Hassan finally admitted the truth to himself. He loved her, not as a game, not as a bet, not as something to conquer. He loved her the way a man loves the thing that saves him. The thought terrified him because love meant vulnerability. Love meant the bet would be exposed. Love meant he would have to confess everything and risk her hatred forever. But his friends were growing impatient. They demanded proof that the bet still stood. They wanted to know when he would discard her. They asked him questions that felt like knives, and he found himself defending her fiercely, then catching himself and laughing to hide the truth. They did not believe him. They could see that something had changed. One friend, drunk on wine, leaned close and said, "You have broken the agreement. You have actually fallen for her." How pathetic. Hassan wanted to kill him. Instead, he simply walked away. But the seed of doubt had been planted. If his friends could see his love, then others could too. If others could see it, then eventually she would know. And when she knew the truth, would she forgive him? Or would she destroy him the way the spirits seemed to be planning? Layla chose her moment carefully. She waited until Hassan was away on business, until Zainab was alone in the palace gardens, gathering flowers like she did every morning. Then Layla approached her with a smile that was poison honey. She sat beside her and began to tell her things. She told her about the night of the feast. She described the bed in detail. Hassan's cruel words, his mockery of poor women, the specific wager that he would keep her for exactly 1 year untouched by emotion. She watched Zainab's face for reactions, but Zainab's expression did not change. She simply listened. When Layla finished, Zainab was silent for so long that Layla wondered if she had heard. Then Zainab stood and walked back to her chamber without a word. That night, Zainab removed her wedding beads, the ones Hassan had placed on her, with his cold smile. She folded them carefully and placed them on her pillow. She did not cry. She did not scream. She did something far more dangerous. She became distant. She became untouchable. When Hassan returned home, he found a woman who looked like his wife but spoke like a stranger. The silence that followed was a different kind of torture. Hassan could see that she knew. He could feel the distance between them grow with each passing hour. She answered his questions with yes or no. She moved through the palace like a ghost. She would sit on the balcony and look toward the river, and Hassan would stand nearby, desperate to speak, but unable to find the words. The weight of his deception crushed him every moment. She did not accuse him. She did not rage at him. She simply became unreachable, and that was worse than any anger could have been. He tried to touch her hand once, and she moved it away so gently that it felt like she was breaking his heart on purpose. The palace felt the change. Even the servants grew quiet. Something was ending. The old keeper appeared again one evening, sitting in the courtyard as if he had always been there. He looked at Hassan with eyes that saw everything. He said simply, "Judgment is near. The river is preparing to balance what was broken." Then he vanished. Hassan understood that time was running out. He had a choice to make, and whatever he chose would determine everything that came after. The river began to flood. It started slowly, water rising from places where water should not be. The palace lands that bordered the river overflowed. Crops died. Wells became brackish and undrinkable. It was not a natural flood. Everyone could feel that. It was a punishment, a warning, a demand for justice. The old keeper appeared before Hassan in the throne room. He stood there unbowed, untouched by Hassan's power, and he declared, "The union is cursed. It was built on deceit and pride. Until the truth is spoken before all, the river will not rest. Until the girl is acknowledged with honor, the land will bleed." Hassan felt rage and fear mixing inside him. He had two choices. He could confess everything, the bet, the mockery, the deliberate humiliation, and lose his reputation, his friends, possibly his freedom. Or he could stay silent and watch his empire crumble from a curse he could not fight. He looked at the keeper and said, "Give me time. I will choose." The keeper shook his head. "Time has already run out. Choose now, or the choice will be made for you." Hassan was silent. The curse deepened. The river rose higher. Pride is a stubborn thing. It whispers that you can survive anything. That confession is weakness. That loss is worse than dishonor. Hassan listened to his pride. He chose silence. He told himself that the flood would pass, that the curse would fade, that his wealth and power could protect him from spiritual consequences. He was wrong. The very next week, his business partner disappeared with half his fortune. Investments that seemed secure crumbled into nothing. Banks that had trusted him suddenly called in debts. His wealth began to dissolve like salt in water, and he could not stop it. It moved too fast, too deliberately, as if an invisible hand was unweaving the entire tapestry of his life. His friends came to collect their bets and winnings, but Hassan had nothing to give them. One by one, they abandoned him. They cursed him. They said his pride had destroyed him. And they were right. Within weeks, Hassan went from billionaire to a man with empty pockets and emptier hands. The palace, which had felt like it would last forever, began to feel like a tomb. Zainab watched all of this with eyes that held no satisfaction, only sadness. She knew what was happening. She knew he had chosen his pride over his love. One morning, Zainab simply walked away. She did not pack her things. She did not leave a note. She simply walked out of the palace toward the river, following the same path that had brought her there months ago. Hassan woke to find her gone, and panic seized him more violently than any disease. He ran after her, calling her name, but his legs were weak from months of stress and heartbreak. Behind Zainab, as she walked, the people of the palace followed, the servants who had mocked her, the guards who had watched her suffer, the noble women who had envied her. The very people who had been cruel to her now trailed behind her, like she was leading them somewhere sacred. They could feel what Hassan felt, that the moment of judgment had arrived, and they needed to witness it. Hassan caught up to her at the river's edge, where the water ran wild and swollen. He grabbed her arm and said, "Please, I will confess everything. I will tell the world. I will lose everything. Just please do not leave me." Zainab looked at him with eyes like the river itself. She did not speak. She simply pulled her arm away and continued walking. Behind them, the keeper stood waiting. The public reckoning happened at the river, with everyone gathered on the banks. The keeper stood between Hassan and Zainab, and he raised his hands. The crowd fell silent. He began to speak, and his words seemed to carry the weight of generations. He told the entire story. The bet, the cruelty, the deliberate humiliation of an innocent girl. He named Hassan's pride. He named his mockery of love. He named every cruel word, every false smile, every moment of calculated disrespect. Hassan stood there, completely exposed. Everyone he had ever known heard the truth. His shame was public and absolute. But then the keeper turned to Zainab. He spoke of her strength, her quiet dignity, her refusal to break under cruelty. He spoke of how she had shown more humanity in her poverty than Hassan had shown in all his wealth. He declared that Zainab had been tested and had passed. She was a victor in this story, not the victim. The crowd understood then who the real noble was. As the sun began to set, the keeper announced, "Judgment must be passed. The river demands balance." The keeper told Hassan that he faced a choice that would break him either way. He could keep his remaining wealth and lose Zainab forever. The river would curse his life, and he would die alone and despised. Or he could surrender everything, every coin, every property, every claim to power, and accept exile. Only then, Only if he truly transformed might there be a possibility of redemption. It would not guarantee forgiveness. It would not guarantee that Zainab would take him back. It would only give him a chance to become someone worthy of even asking. Hassan looked at the choice before him the way a man looks at a cliff. He could not climb it. He could only jump and hope to survive the fall. He knelt before Zainab, before the crowd, before the river itself. He said, "I choose nothing. I choose loss." And he meant it. He meant it so completely that Zainab's hard expression flickered for just a moment. Hassan was not begging for her forgiveness. He was not bargaining. He was simply accepting the consequence of his pride. He was choosing to fall, and in that choice, he became someone different. What followed was swift and terrible and necessary. Hassan's remaining wealth dissolved through legal battles and spiritual collapse that no amount of money could fight. People he thought were loyal betrayed him. Banks demanded payment. The palace, which stood as a monument to his arrogance, was seized and emptied. Hassan watched his servants carry out the golden furniture, the expensive paintings, the symbols of everything he had built. The palace emptied until only echoes remained. He was left with nothing. No home, no money, no reputation. The wealth that had taken him a lifetime to accumulate was gone in weeks. He felt lighter and heavier at the same time. The lightness came from being freed of the burden of protecting his image. The heaviness came from understanding what he had sacrificed for pride. Through it all, he caught glimpses of Zainab. She never smiled at his suffering. She never looked satisfied. She only looked sad, as if she was mourning someone who was still alive. Hassan realized that the punishment he was experiencing was not her revenge. It was a consequence of his own choices, and that was so much heavier to bear. Zainab did not run to him when he had nothing. She did not celebrate his fall. Instead, she made it clear that forgiveness was not automatic, not owed, not something she would give simply because he had lost everything. She told him, "You lost your wealth because the river demanded it. You did not lose it for love of me. You lost it to save yourself from a curse. That is not the same thing." Hassan wanted to argue, but he could not. She was right. She told him that if he wanted any possibility of redemption, he would have to prove himself through years of genuine humility, not weeks of pretended change. She said, "Actions speak. Your tears mean nothing. Show me who you have become." Then she told him something that broke him more than the loss of his empire. She said, "I will not punish you, but I also will not forgive you. You will simply have to live with that, and perhaps that is justice." Hassan accepted this condition without protest. He did not beg for better terms. He simply bowed and walked away. Hassan spent the next year wandering, learning what it meant to have nothing. He served in villages, helping the poor with the same hands that had once commanded empires. He worked in fields, moved water, built shelters, the very labor that Zainab had done before he took her. No one knew he was Hassan the billionaire. He was just a man with haunted eyes who worked without complaint. Zainab watched him from a distance. She did not approach him, but she knew where he was, what he was doing. She watched how he treated the people he helped. She saw that his kindness was not performed for an audience. He was kind in private moments when no one was watching. He was kind even when it gained him nothing. The river began to calm. The floods receded. The land began to heal. The keeper appeared to Zainab one evening and said, "The year has passed. He has changed. Not completely, but enough. The question now is what you will choose." Zainab did not answer immediately. She sat by the river for 3 days and 3 nights, listening to the water speak in a language she understood. On the morning of the 4th day, she stood and walked toward the village where Hassan was staying. He did not recognize her at first. When she appeared at the door of the small hut where he was living, Hassan thought he was dreaming. She stood there quietly, the way she always had, and she looked at him with eyes that had seen into his soul and found him wanting, then found him trying. She did not run to him. She did not embrace him. She simply said, "I want to know who you have become." They talked through the entire night. Hassan told her everything, his thoughts, his fears, his journey of understanding that love is not something you conquer or win. It is something you create together through humility and choice. He told her that he did not expect forgiveness. He only wanted to know if there was any possibility of beginning again, not as a billionaire and a village girl, but as two people who had survived something that would have destroyed most people. Zainab listened, and when he finished, she spoke for the first time with something that sounded like hope in her voice. She said, "Then we begin." They did not marry again in a grand ceremony. Instead, they chose to be together in the simplest way, by choosing each other every morning when they woke. They built a small house by the river, in the village where Zainab came from. It was not a palace. It was something far more valuable. It was a home where love had to be earned, where pride had no place, where both of them were equals. Hassan learned to live simply because simplicity was all that remained, and he discovered that simplicity was enough, more than enough. For the first time, his life had meaning that did not come from money or power. It came from the daily choice to love a woman who had suffered because of him. Zainab learned to trust him slowly, day by day, and that trust became the strongest foundation two people could have. They worked together in the fields. They helped the poor who came to them. They became the kind of people that others whispered about, not with envy, but with respect. The keeper came to them one evening and simply smiled. He said nothing, but they understood. The curse had been broken, not by force, but by genuine transformation. Layla, the noble woman who had orchestrated the revelation, did not fare as well. She had believed that exposing the truth would destroy them both and elevate her. Instead, she watched as Zainab rose in the eyes of the people, while she herself became invisible. Her envy grew like a cancer, consuming her from inside. She tried to find power elsewhere, tried to seduce other wealthy men, but no one wanted her. She became bitter, then cruel, then mad. Eventually, she wandered away from the palace and was never seen again. Some said the river took her. Others said she simply disappeared into shame. Hassan felt pity for her, and that was perhaps the truest sign of his change. He did not rejoice in her destruction. He simply understood that envy destroys the person who carries it before it destroys anyone else. He prayed for her the way the poor pray, with genuine hope that she would find peace. The palace itself stood empty, a monument to the emptiness of unchecked pride. Years passed, and Hassan and Zainab became a legend in their own time. People came to them for wisdom, not because they were wealthy, but because they had learned something that most people never learn. Hassan would sit with troubled men and tell them about the cost of pride. Zainab would sit with suffering women and tell them that strength is not found in cruelty, but in the ability to forgive. They built a school by the river where poor children could learn. They created a practice of justice where disputes were resolved through truth and humility, not through power and punishment. What had begun as a curse became a blessing, not only for them but for everyone around them. The river, which had risen in judgment, now flowed peacefully. The land, which had bled, now flourished. Hassan would sometimes stand at the edge of their property and look at the palace in the distance, now crumbling and empty. He felt no desire to reclaim it. He felt only gratitude that it was gone, that it no longer existed as a symbol of his corruption. In its place, he had built something infinitely more valuable. Listen, because this is where the true lesson lives, not in the gold of the palace. But here, the old keeper, now ancient beyond measure, came to them one last time. He sat by the river as the sun set, and he spoke words that were meant to echo across time. He said, "Pride borrows time. It promises everything and delivers only dust. But kindness owns eternity. It asks for nothing and gives everything." This man learned this truth by losing everything. This woman lived this truth while possessing nothing. Together, they became proof that love is not conquered by wealth, but earned through humility and loss. He looked at both of them and asked a question that he wanted the world to hear. If you humiliate the innocent for sport, mock the poor, and make bets with human lives, what do you deserve when love turns against you? He paused. What would you have chosen? Pride or love? Power or peace? The answer you give determines who you become. Then the keeper stood, placed his hand on their heads in blessing, and walked toward the river. He did not return. They understood that his work was done. The story was complete. The lesson was spoken. Now it belonged to everyone who heard it.